Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 240 area code. Who's this?
Hi, Steve from Baltimore.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Fine, thanks. I've been thinking about this and wanting to ask you, and it's kind of related to, I kind of consume a variety of information media, and I try to, look at different sources, but I have to acknowledge that I have certain biases, and I probably, tend to go to places that are telling me sort of what I want to hear.
Yeah, we all
Like
do
anyone. But so sometimes I'll be watching cable, the major cable networks, and I guess my thing is I wanted to ask about Hillary Clinton and this perception of her being so distrusted and disliked. That just always kind of rang false to me. She just seems no more, distrustworthy as most people in politics. She just seems like an average sort of a political figure that, I guess just, I just wonder, I'd like to get a better sense of if that's accurate or if I'm just, falling prey to the media perception.
Let me, I got to be honest with you. This is something I wrestle with all the time. Like there is, there is no doubt that Hillary Clinton, and part of it is like, part of it what makes it hard for me is that I always had a problem with Bill Clinton's politics from a very, literally, I remember looking around the room. I knew exactly where I was in 92 when he got elected. And I remember being in a comedy club. We were all watching it in San Francisco, looking around going like, why is everybody so excited? I mean, it was, and part of it was because it was after more or less 12 years of Reagan, of the Reagan era. But I will also say that the Republicans and the right wing hated Bill Clinton so much I think they hated him so much for a couple of reasons. One, he did not win with a majority. And I think this really drove them crazy. And it also gave them space to do this stuff. And it also was sort of at the time where sort of right-wing media was growing and this stuff was a cesspool. And it was also a time where the mainstream media sort of put this stuff into their bloodstream. I mean, this was why Air America got developed, because 10, 12 years later, it was quite clear that you'd go into CNN and to MSNBC at the time and obviously Fox, but CNN and MSNBC, and every single producer would get their news from Drudge. Every single producer would get their news from Drudge. I swear to God. And I would ask them, and what's the first place you go for news? And the first thing they would say would be Drudge. And part of it was because it was the only aggregator at the time. And they didn't know. And they were just as sort of like lazy about this stuff as anybody else. And, there's a perfect example of this laziness from last night. This guy, Patrick Healy from the New York Times, he had to write his piece before the speech because they were going to press. He didn't have to, but for whatever reason, they did. And he just accepted what the Trump people had told him at face value and took a gamble. And fortunately, Trump is so over the top. And there's so many other sources now that it became a huge embarrassment for the Times. So there's no doubt in my mind that Hillary Clinton is demonized and exaggerated. I mean, she was so hated largely, too, because she represented feminism at that time. Like, she was... And so I think... But there are things about the Clintons that I think are not as bad as reported, right? But are just like... why give a speech to Goldman Sachs? I mean, why do it? Why do it? You're making so much money.
Right.
And it's, okay, let's say the three speeches are worth...
Is it something to do with the way they handle these perceptions? And is it really different than how other politicians do? That's what I hear from people who even are supposedly somewhat supportive, that they just, they keep getting into these problems, the Clintons, and they're somewhat of their own making, and they kind of don't handle them well.
But it's both.
I think,
it's both.
Yeah,
it's both
maybe a combination.
because it's hard
Yeah.
to. It's hard to, and let me get you go. Let me let you go, and so I can move on. But I appreciate the call. But let me just say this: it's hard to judge them and compare them to other politicians because there really isn't another example of this, and certainly not on the left. On the right, like the material is there, but the fact is that I think most reporters, not all, and not and not a vast majority, but I think most reporters tend to be center left, and certainly for a long time, and I think this still exists at some of the major publications, they are most concerned with appearing that way in print. And so it's much easier for them to go after, in their minds, and I don't know if it's a conscious decision or what, but they feel like they're doing their due diligence to, find more fire than is actually there, So, Politico has a story about Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation taking all this taxpayer money. Well, yeah, because there's a law that says presidents in their work afterwards can draw on money. And so, and it's true that he's drawn on a lot more money than, say, George W. Bush. But George W. Bush has been sitting in his ranch, doing watercolors and hasn't done shit, frankly, for anybody. And so, you can say, well, say what you will about Bill Clinton. The Clinton Foundation, and there may be, you may take issue with, like, what are the ethics of someone being Secretary of State and dealing with people who have contributed to the Clinton Foundation? Well, I mean, they made an arrangement with the Obama administration that outlined that they didn't break. I mean, we may have problems with this, and you may have problems with Clinton's other actions, but the idea of taking taxpayer money for that work is not particularly. I mean, there's a law that you can do it that offers that money, and he's doing stuff. The Clinton Foundation, to the extent that I am in a position to judge, I just look at like those charity measures, and they give them fairly high grades, certainly higher than the Red Cross. Now, the Red Cross is, I think, very problematic, but it's a little bit of both. Like, why does Clinton have her own server? Well, probably because she was afraid of exactly what ended up happening anyways. And so it was a bad tactic. Why should she be afraid of people digging through all their shit? Well, I mean, if you look at what led to Monica Lewinsky and the impeachment, it started with completely unrelated things. The Hillary Clinton emails was all about Benghazi. And that's the way that it works. So I don't think it is one or the other. I think there's definitely a demonization of the Clintons and in the press for things that I think are, frankly, not the things to demonize them for. If you're going to demonize certain, aspects of it. There are certain policies that Bill Clinton pursued. I don't know if Hillary Clinton's going to pursue them. I mean, I don't know. So there's no easy answer for that in my mind. Hello, you. I'm Sam Seder. Looking for smart progressive talk that is occasionally amusing? Well, subscribe to our YouTube feed. Subscribe to our podcast. Like us on Facebook, and just generally enjoy us.